Lagos at night was a city of indulgence. Money spoke the loudest. And in elite places like Elysium, the wealthy didn't just come to relax. They came to claim whatever they desired. Vanessa was one of those desires. She wasn't just another beautiful woman in the club, she was the woman. The one whose presence turned heads, whose life on social media was the definition of luxury. She moved in circles where influence and wealth dictated everything. Men competed for her attention, and she knew her worth. The luxury trips, designer fashion, and high-end lifestyle didn't come freely. Only men with the means to sustain it could be in her space. Tonight, she sat in her usual private booth, legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand. The dim lights reflected off her diamond bracelet, a recent gift from one of the men trying to win her over. She had seen all types, desperate, arrogant, reckless. None impressed her anymore. Then she saw him. Dominic. Unlike the younger men who filled the club, Dominic wasn't here for entertainment. At 55, he was past that. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built power, not inherited it. His presence alone demanded attention, yet he never sought it. He was used to getting what he wanted, and tonight, what he wanted was her. Without hesitation, he walked straight to her booth, ignoring the men lingering around her. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Vanessa barely glanced at him. "You must be lost." His voice was deep, composed. "Not at all. I came for you." She smirked, finally meeting his gaze. "And you are?" Dominic didn't blink. "The man who changes things." Her smirk deepened. "You don't even know my name." His expression remained unreadable. "Not yet. But I will." Vanessa tilted her head slightly, intrigued despite herself. He wasn't trying to impress her with charm or flattery. No small talk, no hesitation. She took a slow sip of her wine. "And what exactly do you think you're changing?" "You," he said simply. "Your world. Your future." She let out a soft chuckle. "Oh? And I suppose you're offering something better?" Dominic leaned in slightly. "I don't offer. I decide." He reached into his pocket and placed a sleek black card on the table. "No name?" she mused, tapping the card with a manicured nail. "Call when you're ready," he said, rising to his feet. Then, without another word, he walked away. Vanessa watched him disappear into the crowd, then looked back at the card. For the first time in a long time, she was the one left curious. Vanessa had encountered powerful men before, politicians, business moguls, men who believed their wealth made them unstoppable. But Dominic was different. He wasn't just rich. He was precise, intentional. The kind of man who never wasted words, never asked twice. For days, she ignored the card he had given her. She had seen men like him before, older, confident, expecting women to fall in line. But there was something about him she couldn't shake. He hadn't begged for her time. He had simply offered and walked away. Men never walked away from her. Vanessa shared a modest 3-bedroom apartment in Lekki with 3 other women, Sandra, Linda, and Bella. Like her, they thrived on the lifestyle that came with wealthy admirers. Their home wasn't extravagant, but it was stylish, comfortable, and filled with high-end gifts from men who wanted their attention. That evening, she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone when Linda nudged her. "You've been staring at that number for hours. Just call him already." Vanessa sighed. "I don't know. He's different." "Different how?" Sandra asked, painting her nails. "He didn't try too hard. No fake compliments, no promises of the world. He just left his number and walked away." Bella smirked. "That's why you're thinking about him. Men that act like they don't care are the ones that mess with women's heads." Vanessa rolled her eyes, but deep down she knew they were right. Something about Dominic lingered in her mind. Finally, she dialed the number. The call rang. No answer. She frowned and tried again. Still, no response. Linda raised a brow. "Ah, maybe he wasn't serious after all." Sandra chuckled. "Or maybe he just enjoys playing games." Bella scoffed. "Trust me, This is why men like him have control. They don't chase, and before you know it, we're the ones doing the running. Vanessa exhaled sharply. I'm not chasing anyone. Just as she was about to drop her phone, it rang. She hesitated, then picked up. Hello, Mr. Dominic. It's Vanessa. We met the other night. A brief pause. Then his voice came through, deep, steady, and commanding. I remember. What took you so long? Vanessa crossed her legs, keeping her tone measured. I don't rush things. That's good, Dominic said. But I don't like to waste time. She exhaled lightly. I thought I should reach out. You should have done that sooner. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Vanessa hesitated. Where exactly? I'll send a car. His tone left no room for negotiation. A beat of silence. Then, the line went dead. Vanessa lowered the phone slowly, staring at the blank screen. The conversation had been brief, but something about Dominic's tone lingered in her mind. Calm, firm, and undeniably in control. You don't look too happy. Sandra's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Vanessa glanced up to see her three friends watching her from the living room. Sandra sat cross-legged on the couch, sipping from a glass of juice. Linda scrolled through her phone, pretending not to eavesdrop, while Bella, always the quiet observer, studied her with raised brows. Was that him? Sandra asked, setting her glass down. Vanessa leaned against the dining table and nodded. Yes. Linda looked up. And? He said 8 p.m. tomorrow. He'll send a car. Sandra let out a low whistle. That man doesn't waste time. I told you he's different, Bella added softly. Vanessa folded her arms. It's just a meeting, Linda scoffed. A meeting with a billionaire? My dear, that's not just a meeting. That's an opportunity, Sandra smirked. And let's be honest, men that act like they don't care are the ones that confuse us the most. Vanessa rolled her eyes. It's not that deep. Linda leaned forward. But he didn't even tell you where you're meeting? He said he'd send a car. Sandra raised a brow. Mysterious. I like it. Vanessa exhaled, pushing off the table. Let's not overthink this. I'll meet him tomorrow and we'll see where it leads. Linda grinned. Better pick your best dress. Men like Dominic don't just see where things lead. They take charge. Vanessa said nothing, but deep inside she knew Linda was right. Dominic didn't seem like the kind of man who left things to chance. Vanessa groaned as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, dragging her out of sleep. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, blinking against the brightness of the screen. A new message. Good morning. Send me your address so my driver knows where to pick you up. She stared at the message for a moment before typing a reply. Good morning. Pickup time is 7 p.m. Here's my address. She hit send and tossed the phone aside, rolling onto her back. Even though she had been with many wealthy men, there was something different about Dominic. His tone, his control, the way he didn't waste words. It was refreshing and unsettling at the same time. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the bedroom door creaking open. Sandra peeked in. You're awake? Vanessa stretched. Barely. Better get up. Bella's making breakfast. With a sigh, Vanessa swung her legs out of bed. Today was going to be a long day. By evening, Vanessa was standing in front of her mirror, carefully applying lip gloss. She had chosen a fitted black dress, elegant, yet revealing just enough to remind Dominic of what she brought to the table. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice, then continuously. She sighed, glancing at the screen. Elijah calling. She hissed and looked away. Sandra, who was adjusting her wig in front of the vanity, noticed and raised a brow. Are you not going to pick that? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Is it not that annoying boy that keeps disturbing me? Elijah, the man from her estate who was always checking up on her. He had been a problem since the first day they met. She hadn't been in the best mood that day. Her cramps were unbearable, and she had rushed to the supermarket across her estate to buy sanitary pads, only to realize at the counter that her money was missing. The cashier had been impatient. "Madam, a beg, if you no get money, no waste my time." A few customers turned to look, and embarrassment crept up Vanessa's spine. Just as she was about to walk away, a voice spoke up behind her. "I'll handle it." She turned to see Elijah, tall, neatly dressed, with a kind but confident face. He handed the cashier some cash, and before she could protest, he smiled. "It's nothing. Take it." Outside, they had walked a bit together, and he introduced himself. She gave him her number, not because she was interested, but because it was easier than rejecting him outright. Since then, Elijah had taken it upon himself to check up on her every day. She ignored him. He didn't stop trying. The phone continued buzzing, and Bella smirked from where she sat on the bed. "That guy really likes you," Vanessa scoffed. "He should like himself first. He wants a relationship, but I don't do relationships. I only care about money, and that's it. Love doesn't pay bills." Just as she reached for the phone, the screen flashed again, Dominic calling. Her heart skipped. She quickly answered. "Hello?" His voice was deep, steady. "My driver is at your gate." Vanessa glanced at the clock. 7 p.m. sharp. Her grip on the phone tightened. This man was precise. "I'll be out in a minute," she said. The call ended. Sandra whistled. "That man does not waste time." Linda grinned. "Girl, you better not keep him waiting." Vanessa grabbed her clutch and took a final look at herself in the mirror. Tonight was just a meeting, but something in her gut told her that meeting Dominic would change everything. Vanessa stepped out of the house, her heels clicking against the pavement as the cool night breeze brushed against her skin. The sleek black SUV parked outside stood out on the quiet street. The driver, a tall, middle-aged man in a black suit, stepped out and opened the back door for her. "Good evening, ma'am." She nodded and slid into the plush leather seat, inhaling the faint scent of luxury car freshener. The driver shut the door and got behind the wheel. As the car pulled away, Vanessa checked her reflection in her compact mirror, smoothing her hair. Her heart pounded, not from nerves, but curiosity. Mr. Dominic was different. Older, commanding, and precise. She glanced at her phone. No messages from Elijah. Good. The ride was smooth, the driver silent. She stared out the window, watching as they left her neighborhood and entered the more upscale part of the city. The streets were lined with towering buildings, expensive restaurants, and luxury boutiques. After about 20 minutes, the car slowed in front of an exclusive 5-star restaurant. The driver stepped out and opened the door for her. "This way, ma'am." Vanessa stepped out gracefully, adjusting her dress. The restaurant was quiet. Too quiet for such a high-end place. It was the kind of venue where men like Mr. Dominic handled private business, far from prying eyes. The hostess, a woman dressed in an elegant black gown, smiled as she approached. "Right this way, ma'am. He's expecting you." Vanessa followed her through a dimly lit corridor into a private dining room. The moment she stepped in, she saw him. Mr. Dominic. He was seated at the center of the room, his posture relaxed, yet authoritative. A glass of whiskey sat in front of him, half filled with golden liquid. He looked up as she entered, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Vanessa took in his presence. He wasn't just wealthy. He carried himself with an air of absolute control, the kind that came with power, not just money. Finally, he gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." She smirked but obeyed, lowering herself onto the chair with the grace of a woman who knew her worth. "You're very punctual, sir," she said, crossing her legs. Mr. Dominic smirked, lifting his glass. "I don't waste time. I'm a businessman. Every business should know how to keep time." Vanessa let out a soft chuckle, running a manicured finger along the rim of the menu. "I see." A waiter entered, setting a menu in front of her. "Order whatever you want," Mr. Dominic said, watching her closely. She picked up the menu but barely glanced at it. "I don't eat much at night." Mr. Dominic swirled his drink. "A woman who knows discipline, I like that." Vanessa leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "And what exactly do you like about me, sir?" He held her gaze, taking a slow sip of his drink before answering. "Everything." The room fell silent for a moment, a dangerous kind of silence. Vanessa was used to being admired, but something about the way Mr. Dominic said it sent a shiver down her spine. She decided to test him. "You barely know me." A slow smile spread across his lips. "I know enough." She tilted her head. "Like what?" Mr. Dominic set his glass down. "I know you don't belong to the life you live. You wear luxury like it's second nature, but you still hesitate before ordering in places like this." He leaned back. "I know you like control, yet you're drawn to men who take it away from you." Vanessa's breath caught in her throat for just a second, but she masked it with a smirk. "You read women well, sir. I read people well." Silence again. Vanessa finally picked up the menu, flipping through it lazily. "So, what exactly are we doing here, Mr. Dominic?" He watched her for a moment before replying. "We're getting to know each other." His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Vanessa wasn't sure if she liked that, or if she was just intrigued. She crossed her legs, her emerald green satin dress shimmering under the lights as she leaned back into the seat. Her long lashes fluttered as she examined the man before her. Dominic, in his tailored navy blue suit, exuded wealth and power. His Rolex gleamed as he casually rested his hand on the table, his sharp eyes studying her with an unreadable expression. A waiter approached, pouring wine into their glasses before stepping away. Dominic picked up his glass, swirling the liquid before taking a slow sip. "You have an interesting way of carrying yourself," he finally spoke, his deep voice calm but firm. "Confidence. That's rare." Vanessa smirked, lifting her glass to her lips. "I've had to learn quickly in this world. Confidence keeps you ahead." Dominic nodded, setting his glass down. "And what exactly do you want in this world?" She tilted her head, meeting his gaze. "Money, comfort, a life where I answer to no one?" A small smile tugged at the corner of Dominic's lips. "Smart answer. Independence is a luxury very few can afford." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "And you? What do you want, Mr. Dominic?" He chuckled, the sound low and calculated. "I already have what I want. But maintaining power requires strategy. The wise know when to expand, when to let go, and when to keep something valuable close." Vanessa held his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. There was something about the way he spoke, direct, assertive, yet deliberately vague. The food arrived, the waiter placing the plates before them. Dominic's meal was a perfectly grilled steak with a side of asparagus, while Vanessa had opted for seafood pasta. As they ate, the conversation flowed smoothly, touching on wealth, power, and the unpredictability of life. Dominic listened more than he spoke, watching Vanessa with an intensity that made her feel like she was being assessed. At some point, he leaned back, wiping the corner of his mouth with a napkin. "You intrigue me, Vanessa." She raised a brow. "In what way?" "You remind me of someone I once knew." His voice was quieter now, almost reflective. Vanessa studied him, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Dominic chuckled again, this time with a hint of amusement. "That depends." She smirked. "On what?" "On whether you're as smart as you think you are." The tension between them was thick, a silent game of power playing out between a seasoned businessman and a woman who had learned to survive in a world of men like him. As the night wore on, Dominic checked his watch before signaling for the bill. "It's getting late," he said. "Let's not keep the driver waiting." Vanessa nodded, finishing the last sip of her wine. As they stood, Dominic placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her out of the restaurant with the confidence of a man who always got what he wanted. But Vanessa was no ordinary woman, and neither of them knew just how entangled their fates were about to become. As Vanessa stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. The black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon parked by the curb gleamed under the streetlights, its presence commanding. Dominic's driver, a tall, well-built man in a black suit, stood by the passenger door, ready to open it. Dominic gestured toward the car. "After you." Vanessa slid into the luxurious leather seat, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Dominic joined her, the door shutting with a quiet thud. The driver smoothly pulled onto the road, the city lights reflecting in the tinted windows. The silence in the car was thick, almost expectant. Dominic rested his elbow on the armrest, fingers tapping lightly against his chin as he watched her. "You're quiet," he noted. Vanessa smirked, turning to face him. "I'm thinking... about what?" She studied him for a moment before replying. "Men like you." Dominic chuckled. "And what do you think you know about men like me?" "That you don't do anything without a reason," she said, crossing her legs. "So why dinner? Why the interest?" He leaned slightly toward her, his cologne intoxicating. "I appreciate beauty. I admire ambition. But more importantly, I like exclusivity." Vanessa's heartbeat quickened slightly, but she kept her expression unreadable. "Exclusivity? I don't share," Dominic said simply. "I have no patience for competition." Vanessa arched a brow. "And what makes you think I would be interested in such an arrangement?" Dominic's gaze was piercing. "Because I can give you what others can't. Stability, comfort, a life where you don't have to hustle every night." For the first time, Vanessa was silent. Dominic watched her reaction carefully before continuing. "I don't expect an answer now, but think about it." The car pulled up in front of her estate, the gates opening slowly. The driver remained silent as he stepped out to open the door for her. Vanessa hesitated for a brief moment before stepping out. She turned to Dominic, who remained seated, his expression unreadable. "I'll think about it," she finally said, her voice calm. Dominic smiled. "Good girl." The car door shut, and Vanessa stood there as the vehicle drove away, her mind racing. What exactly had she just walked into?